So thanks for encouraging me with your words and your singing this morning. We are starting something new this morning, so we're going to be in the book of Genesis for a few weeks. So if you have your Bibles digitally or paper, if you know that technology still, we'll be in Genesis 37 this morning. Before we get there, just wanted to have maybe revisit something a little bit together, one of my favorite subjects. Actually, we had a board meeting this week. And, you know, board meetings can be, they can be okay parts of your week. They can be heavy. We had a really good board meeting this week. I felt as a team we were really engaging on important matters that relate to the health and well-being and future of Vernon Alliance. And also just talking as people about some of the stuff we're navigating in our own lives and supporting one another. I'm so grateful for the team of elders that are serving us together and to work with them. So as the meeting started out, it didn't happen exactly like this, but someone said, hey, what do we want to talk about tonight? And someone else said, let's talk about COVID. And I said, yes, please. That's the best of all the subjects we could talk about. I love it. Please, guidelines, rules, opinions. I would love to discuss this. That's exactly what I said, something along those lines. But I do feel, I don't know how it works in your house, but sometimes we just need to revisit in my home kind of what our standard, what we're doing, what the agreement, the mutual agreements are. I live in a home with 5 women. I am solo with my 2 male cats, and they are only half male cats, if you know what I mean. But I don't know if you need socks. You can come to my house at any time, in any room, in any place, and you will find socks littered on the ground anywhere. I don't know what it is. I don't know if there's any men in the house with me, but when I put on my socks during the day, they stay on my feet until the end of the day. And then I take them off and I put them in the laundry basket. But apparently that's just not the way the other gender thinks about socks. And you put them on, you take them off, you throw them randomly, you leave them on the couch. And so sometimes we, at our house, just say, hey, let's make a deal from now on. If you take off your socks, please put them in a basket or at least somewhere, you know, and we make a mutual agreement. And then what I notice is that over the course of the week, or the month, the days and the weeks, we kind of forget about it, and then there's socks everywhere, and we kind of have to have a family little moment. Say, hey, remember the sock deal? And everyone goes, oh, are we still doing that? Yeah, we're still doing that. So I know for some of you, for all of us, this is the matter of the day for us. Where do we fall? How do we navigate this stuff, the heaviness and the sickness and the politics and of it? And many of us would like less, many of us would like more, some of us in between, some of us trying to navigate in the middle. And I kind of feel that's where we as a board are seeking to find a way to make it through what is going to be, friends, a short time. In the scope of eternity, I'm serious. What is a few weeks? What is a few months? In the course of 1 trillion years, what is a couple? And so for a short time, we're just saying, hey, masks is one way that we're navigating this together. And every week, we as leadership are kind of trying to walk that line. Those of you who are feeling heavy and disappointed with that, others who feel that we've advertised a certain set of standards and they don't find that to be true and they feel that we've misrepresented ourselves. So I'm just asking, hey, let's work together for a short time. We'll get there. And then we'll go back to fighting about things that really matter together. And I know that some of you think I'm taking that too lightly. I am not. I don't take this lightly at all. I am heartbroken that we have to talk about this stuff. But let's navigate it together. Let's see it through. Let's stay together as a church family. And this is one way we seek to honor as we do that. And I know it's hard. I don't love it. I don't laugh about it at board meetings at all. But I want to see us through as one body, and this is how we're going to do it. You with me? Thank you. We're going to look at, in the next few weeks, at a favorite Bible character of mine. I have, a few top Bible characters. Of course, Jesus gets the automatic win. But for those who are not God in the flesh, my two favorite guys are Daniel and Joseph. And I know that some of you, as I've hinted that I'm going to be here, you say, yeah, that's one of my favorite people as well in the Bible. And so we're going to just walk through his story and see what that reveals to us. And we'll actually have to travel really fast because to do it justice, probably we need to spend like 3 months getting through the story, but we'll do it in about 5 weeks. I challenge you to read the story for yourself. Genesis 37 to 50 is the main chunk of scripture that deals with Joseph. For the story in context, you could probably do Genesis 12 to 50, or you could just read all of Genesis in the next 5 weeks. That'd be just a little more than a chapter a day. And as we launch into a series like this, there is all kinds of things we could say about historical background, biblical context, but let's just get into it and start by considering our families. All of you here today are part of a family. If you're in the room this morning, you will see many different expressions of what I'm sure are very nice families, right? Nice kids that are in the rooms out there around this one. Nice teenagers, if they were able to get out of bed this morning. Nice parents, couples. Nice grandparents, maybe even some really nice great-grandparents that are with us today. And there are husbands and wives that are here getting along nicely, arm around each other, maybe laughing and chuckling at the lame COVID jokes. We're all in our places today with sunshiny faces, right? And everybody, or most of you, had time to comb your hair before you arrived this morning. And everybody is happy to be at church, right? And then there are those of you with children under 9 who know how relaxing it is to come to church on Sunday mornings and just you come ready to worship Jesus and you're excited to do that. But appearances on Sunday morning do not tell the whole story. And just so that we are living in the same reality together today, just to ensure that we're being honest with one another, let's admit that all of us, all of our families are a little random, and in some cases, all of our family, actually in all cases, all of our families bear some kind of woundedness and brokenness. Even really, really nice families like the ones gathered here today. I've had conversations with dozens and dozens of you in the last year, and 85% of the time, at some point, we talk about the dynamics of your family. And many of those are, well, for lack of a better word, difficult. Gathered in this room and online today, we've got families who are struggling with what we might call the normal challenges of being a family. Moms and dads who are barely hanging on with the day-to-day responsibilities of raising kids or supporting their adult kids. In this room are all the challenges of two very different people trying to keep the promises that they made to each other on their wedding day. Single parents trying to balance career and family. Grandparents sorting out their appropriate relationships with their kids and their grandkids, and children navigating the appropriate responsibilities they have to their aging parents. And then, added onto all that quote-unquote normal stuff, we navigate extra stressors in our family. Conflict, sickness, failure, betrayal. Sitting here today are children, women, men who are abusing or being abused physically, sexually, emotionally. Kids who hate their parents and parents who act like they hate their kids. People who are in affairs, contemplating affairs, dealing with the wreckage of an affair. Some of us are family members who have anger control issues, spending control issues, laziness issues, families who are battling or choosing to ignore drug or alcohol or pornography addictions. We have mental illness and depression and all that comes along with that brokenness. Sons-in-laws who are feuding with their mother-in-laws, daughters struggling to break free of the control of their parents, older parents struggling to give up their independence, and kids who are refusing to take responsibility for their aging moms and dads. And to beat a dead horse, we could add onto that the COVID bonus, right? All the extra family fun that we get and we received thrown in for free in March 2020. Isolation, insecurity, sharp division over politics. And again, let's just stay honest with each other, right? That's not out there in the world somewhere. It's in here. This is us. I don't know what you feel about or think about when you consider your family today, but I wonder if some of you may be wondering this. Has God forgotten my family? Why isn't he doing anything to stop the bleeding? Is my family beyond hope, beyond redemption? Am I justified in walking away from God if he seems to be walking away from us? What good could come out of this dysfunctional tangle of people that I call family? In Genesis 37, we come to the story of a family. Actually, this is Abraham's family, the family that God has chosen to bless the entire world, including us. And if you want to read about that, you probably need to start in Genesis 12 and go to like 25 or something like that. Despite the fact that his wife Sarah could not have kids, eventually she and Abraham had a very special son named Isaac. And Isaac had two special sons of his own, Jacob and Esau. And the story of Joseph is actually the story of Jacob's family. Now, you would expect that because this is a Bible story, these are biblical people, right? A specially chosen and blessed family, that these are going to be really nice people, right? The family that you want to move in next door. Because that's the kind of family that God would pick, right? If he's thinking about writing Bible stories that you're going to learn in 2021, 2022, then it's going to be great, right? Well, let's think about that for a few minutes. Jacob fell in love with this girl named Rachel. And in order to pay off the dowry, he worked for 7 years for the right to marry her. But on his wedding day, his father-in-law deceived him, and instead of Rachel under the veil, his father-in-law substituted her older, uglier sister, Leah. And we don't know how much he drank at the party, but when he woke up the next day, somehow it didn't dawn on him that who he married was not the person he thought, and he is furious that he got worked over. But he is so head over heels in love with Rachel that he works 7 more years to get the right to marry her, which I'm sure did wonders for Leah's sense of self-worth. And he marries both sisters. And of course, Jacob's favorite wife is Rachel, but she has difficulty getting pregnant, while Leah has no problem getting pregnant and has a lot of sons, 6 to be exact, and there are daughters on top of this. Not only that, Jacob sleeps with her servant girl Zilpah and has 2 more sons with her. Then he sleeps with Rachel's servant girl Bilhah and has 2 more sons with her. And finally he gets Rachel pregnant, and her son is named Joseph. Those were the details that were left out when you learned about Joseph and the coat of many colors growing up. How do you suppose the family politics were around the dinner table at Jacob's house? But the story of dysfunction is just getting started. Let's pick it up in Genesis chapter 37. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made him an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Joseph is ratting out his brothers for their bad behavior. This is not 6-year-olds tattletaling. These are grown men, and a teenager is bringing back bad reports to their dad. Joseph is given a richly ornamented robe. You probably grew up with the King James kind of way, a coat of many colors. We don't know exactly what it was, but it was a designer robe of some kind that showed off Joseph's wealth and his status as the favorite son. And whatever it was a constant reminder to everyone else's house, in the house and in the family, that he was daddy's favorite. But then things start getting worse. Joseph has dreams, and the point of all these dreams seems to be that one day his brothers, even his parents, will bow down and be subservient to him in some way. And even after a while, Jacob isn't saying anything, but after a while he tells his son to put a cork in it. The whole family culture is like this giant powder keg, a huge stockpile of explosives all thrown together in one room, and all that's missing is a match. And in verse 12, we get the match. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flock near Shechem, and Israel, which is another name for Jacob, said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing their flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. Verse 17. Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan, but they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. And the cistern was empty, there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother." Great, our own flesh and blood. And his brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. Now, imagine for a moment that you are God. and you are scouring the world for potential candidate families to choose as your special chosen family. The family that you will use to bless the entire human population and carry your reputation to the rest of the world. Is this your pick? I mean, if it was my choice, I'd pick the Kardashians any day before this crew. Now, all of you who know, you know the Bible story, you know how this thing is going to turn out. Pretend for a moment that you don't know any of that. What's going to happen next? What kind of life do you think Joseph is going to have from this point on? At best, it is going to take a therapist years of work to untangle this dysfunction. What good could possibly come from this mess? This sorry excuse for a family. This is kind of like not the right way to tell a story, but let's fast forward a few decades and go to Genesis 50. By this time, Jacob is dead. Many of the rifts in the family have been healed, and we'll get to those details in the coming weeks. But at this point, it is decades later. And there is still, despite a lot of healing and miracles that have gone on in this family, there is uncertainty about whether they can really recover from the faking death and selling them into slavery thing. And I think as Joseph reflects on what has happened and what God has done, we do get the theme verse, the theme of the entire Joseph narrative. Let me read a little section of the story, Genesis 50, starting in verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now, please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." And when their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said, fulfilling the dreams. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." We'll get to the details of all that Joseph was talking about in the next month, but somehow God used the whole family disaster, the jealousy, the favoritism, the hatred, the violence, human trafficking. All of that was used by God to keep this family alive in what was, at least for them, a global economic disaster. It was all part of his plan to bring them together into one place and see the family grow far beyond their wildest imagination. See, Jacob's family keeps growing, and despite its continuing dysfunction, God continues to stick with them. He doesn't forget about them. It's like, and this is poetry you'll read in Scripture, it's like God has their names and faces permanently tattooed to his hands so he cannot forget about them. So much so that the entire New Testament entire Old Testament is caught up in the stories and poetries and rise and falls and successes and failures of Jacob's family, of the descendants of these people. So much so that when you get to the start of the New Testament in Matthew chapter 1, it is actually just a continuation of Jacob's family line. And if you were with us at Christmas, you'll remember when we were in this text, but it's worth looking at it one more time. Matthew chapter 1, Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah, and his brothers. Who were the father of, who were the father of, who was the father of, who was the father of? And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. What good could come out of this family? Well, how about Jesus? When God had to pick a human family to be born into, he picks that one. What was intended to harm, what was a complete basket case, humanly speaking, God intended for good. And it is entirely correct to say that because of that, because Jesus is part of this family line, Christians get adopted into the very same family. If you have placed your faith in Jesus, you are a member of the family of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Judah, one of the guys tossing Joseph into the pit that morning. It is entirely true for us to say this morning that you get to know God personally, you get access to the Holy Spirit, you have the hope of eternal life, precisely because God took what was intended for evil in this family and turned it around for good. And we could go further yet. Consider the parallels between Joseph and Jesus. Like Joseph, Jesus too prophesied that one day he would be elevated and that many would bow the knee to him. Like Joseph, Jacob's great-great-great-great-grandson was misunderstood and rejected by his brothers and countrymen. He was sold not for 20, but 30 pieces of silver. He was beaten, stripped of his robe, put on a cross, and left for dead in a pit. In many ways, Joseph's story is a precursor to the story of God's own son. And you may ask, well, how could he possibly allow something like that to happen? Well, it's the same thing. What people intended for evil, God turned around and used for good to accomplish the saving of many lives. God took the biggest injustice of all time, the murder of his own son, and turned it into the greatest triumph of all time, the turning point of human history. Should we call what happened to Joseph good? Is what humans did to Jesus fine? No, not at all. Are these deceitful and scheming brothers guilty and in the end finally responsible for what they did? 100%. Can we treat our brothers and our sons and our wives and sisters this way and expect that God will wink his eye and look the other way and pretend as though none of that matters? Absolutely not. The ripple effects of Jacob's favoritism, of Joseph's brothers' envy, of the treachery and deceit were profound. There was undoubtedly horrible emotional damage. Imagine the deep scars that were inflicted on every single one of these people. They and you and I will give account to God for what we've done, who we've hurt, who we've abused and disrespected and abandoned. And if the thought of that does not strike some level of fear in you, then something is wrong with your heart. But in the end, even the worst dysfunction, even the most evil chapters of our family stories cannot stop God from achieving his purposes in our lives and in our world. You can take that to the bank. There are no families beyond redemption. So, friends with dysfunctional families just like mine. What do we do if we want to trust God to use evil for good in our families? Well, let me give you what I think are the first two steps. Number one, join this family. The promise of blessing, of using evil for good, is for the family of God. It is for people who have been adopted into the family of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not through DNA or blood lineage, but through the blood of Christ. Galatians 3:29, if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. The way to be part of God's overarching plan to overcome evil with good is not to cross your fingers and hope that it's all going to work out for you in the end. The way to experience that is to get on board with God's plan, to stop resisting Him and submit to Him instead. And you can be assured that God's good plans will succeed, even if they succeed in spite of you. But if you continue to resist Him, if you are determined to live your life your own way, there is no assurance anywhere in the Bible that says, don't worry, it's all going to work for everybody just fine in the end. The book of Romans does say that in all things God works for good. But there is a second half to that verse. He works for good for those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. So if you don't love Him, if you and God are at cross purposes, then the promise is not for you. So the most important decision that you could make for your family, however hurting it is to join the family of God through faith in Jesus Christ. And if you haven't done that, why not today? Step 2, adopt a good from evil perspective. For those of us here who are already a part of the family, this is where our faith comes in. People with faith understand that the way God worked in Joseph's story and Jesus' story is still the way that He works today, taking what was intended for evil and using it for good. Descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, do you believe this? If you do, why is it that when our marriages hit the rocks, or we look back at our horrible childhood experiences, or we are struggling like crazy with our own children, or when we can't control the decisions and directions of the people we love the most, why is it that one of the first things we often do is to assume that God has forgotten me and He's not real? My situation is beyond repair. Or probably God has never dealt with a family situation as complex as mine. Really? Has anyone in your family been sold into slavery recently? Anyone had your brothers tell your parents that you're dead when you're not? Any of you had your own son crucified? He's seen it all and overcome it all before. So, link arms with Him. Don't give up on your faith. Pray like crazy. Learn to forgive. Keep in step with the Spirit. Ask Him to show you where you are the problem in your family, and then cooperate as He works that change in you. And finally, do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what has been promised by Him. Good from evil. I'm going to get the band to direct our attention to the table, and I'll be back in a couple moments. Friends at home, just invite you to grab your elements together.